All right, we got a very special episode of Top 5 tonight. We got two crazy freak guests to list our top 5 wrestling storylines of all time. Woo!
Welcome to Top 5 with Joey Cassata. Starring Joey Cassata.
Team Jesus, my friend. Am I walking around, Park?
Co-starring Ernie Palooza. And the Doctor, Tommy Snyder.
Goddamn.
Now here's your host, Joey Cassata.
All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Top 5. I'm your host, Joey Cassata. We don't have Ernie with us tonight because Ernie knows nothing about wrestling, so I called in two of the biggest freaks on the planet. And by the looks of them, if you're watching this on YouTube, you can tell I've assembled some crew here tonight. First, two of my former bandmates in our band, Kiss Nation. Let's start out with Ace Frehley, Mr. Ruby Rinekso.
Hey, what's up, gang? What's up? Great to be here. Seeing Los, seeing you, Joey. Talk about some wrestling. It's going to be a good time. Let's do it.
All right, and on the bottom of your screen, don't try to adjust the screen. Don't adjust the picture. It's not fuzzy. It's not. This is really him. The long lost Samoan brother.
I thought it was my Wi-Fi.
We got Los Espada.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Joey and Ruby.
Oh,
God, three of
wow.
us in a room is not a good thing.
What's happening, you freaks? So we haven't, the three of us, when was the last time the three of us were in a room together?
Wow. God knows when.
Cutting room, maybe.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. Yeah, you're right. I was
Well,
going to say.
we were in the same building, but not really together.
Right. So what's happening, you freaks? So obviously we got a long history together. So just to recap, everyone, Carlos, Ruby, and I were in a band, Kiss Nation, together. I joined. I was the last member to join. So I joined in 2001.
I gave you like 5 songs to audition. Very easy audition. Routine. Despite what you might have said in your fictitious book. I'm just saying.
You know what? Now that we have a third person here, you're right. We've been battling back and forth. I've been saying for years, and it's written in my book, which makes it law, by the way, that Ruby gave me 33 songs to learn. 33 songs to learn for my audition for Kiss Nation.
I remember.
He says he gave me like 7 or 8. Carlos, can you please?
I remember it being a large number because when he had mentioned how many songs you sent him, I was even befuddled because I said, "Man, Eric Carr didn't even have that many songs to learn when he joined Kiss."
That is completely a half truth.
So he's right in a weird way, because what he did, he sent me a list of 12, and then about 3 hours later, he's like, "You know what? Actually, why don't you look over these 12 as well?" And then the next morning, like the morning of the audition, he's like, "Yeah, well, you know what? Actually, can you look over these 12 as well? And by the way, we do all the live, animalized, uncensored versions of all these songs. Can you please make sure that you have those versions?"
All lies.
Pure fiction. All lies. Viewers here, they don't know what they're talking about. If I misread history, I gave him maybe 6 or 7 songs.
Oh, good.
Did I possibly give him a list of 30 songs? Maybe, but I didn't say he had to learn 30 songs.
And
maybe do about 5 or 6.
And the caveat, I learned, of course, all 36, 33, whatever the hell it was. So I'm ready to fire any one of them off at first. I said, "Guys, what do you want to do first?" Ruby goes, "Oh, I don't know. Let's do Strutter." I said, well, just so you know, I know Strutter, but I'm going to let you
I
know.
remember you saying that.
Here's the email. Strutter is not on the 33 song list.
I will admit to that. That part is true. That part is true.
So even after all that, I joined the band. We did a lot of fun things together. We have a doc filmed for VH1. It's on my YouTube channel called Mock Rock, Kiss Nation Mock Rock. Check it out. I'll add the link to this episode, but it's a full documentary VH1 shot of us about the band. Gene and Paul from Kiss are in it. It's a lot of fun. It's really, if you like Z-Rock, and these guys always give me shit about this. If anyone out there is a fan of Z-Rock,
we're waiting for our residuals.
This is really the start of Z-Rock, because us three morons, along with Paulie
Basically,
Z,
stole all of our road trip stories and put it in season 1 of Z-Rock. So, any ZO2 fans watching, if you've enjoyed the first season of Z-Rock, just imagine us. It's us. It's our stories.
Yeah. Well,
So
we didn't even get asked to make a cameo.
No.
well, I mean, listen, first of all, we can't steal the stories if they're half our stories as well, number one. Number two, we tried to lobby for you, but the network was like, listen, we can't have those two faces on TV. They said, let's recast them.
I'm not gonna say who probably said that, but yeah, I get that.
But it's true. The VH1 doc, a lot of the footage that got left on the cutting room floor really was what Z-Rock was. Our stories, our banter together, calling each other freak, all that started with Kiss Nation, and it just blended over to Z-Rock because obviously Paulie Z was in Kiss Nation with us, and my banter with Paulie always stayed. And then, of course, I just had the same banter with Dave, and I just made fun of him too. And it's the New York East Coast humor about, just ragging on each other all the time, I think.
And can I just tell everyone watching here, I'm, currently in the current version of the Kiss Nation. I'm still in. I got to tell you, without Joey and Carlos, my stress level is so much at ease right now.
Probably higher now.
You guys drove me nuts.
I love how you only mentioned 2, so that means somebody else is giving you a hard time.
But what about the other member of Kiss Nation? Paulie is the one that drove you the most nuts.
Well, he's not here.
That's true.
We'll do a top 5 with all 4 of us, and I'll let loose on him. How about that?
That is an actual great suggestion. I think we got to get Paulie on one of these days. We do a top 5 Kiss Nation road stories.
Yeah, and how he just tortured me about, it's only a tribute band, but now he's in a Queen tribute band. I'm like, okay, whatever.
Oh, he used to torture you. Yeah.
He's in 3 tribute bands now or something like that.
All right, so I know we got a little bit of a time constraint today. I got you two on. Obviously, 2 big wrestling fans. Everyone knows I'm a major wrestling fan. I've been wanting to do this topic for a long time. Hard to get people to really dive in the way I think the 3 of us will dive into this. We're going to be doing our top 5 wrestling storylines of all time. Now, what is a wrestling storyline, Carlos? What's an angle? What does that mean? Can it just be, what was your criteria?
Well, for an angle, it's all about it's just like telling a story in general. You're the beginning, middle, and end, and the payoff at the end. So what starts it, and then how emotionally connected is everyone to the resolve. So that's where you end up. Your resolve is obviously most of the time is a pay-per-view event.
If there were even pay-per-views during some of these storylines. What about you? Did you have any kind of okay, this is what I think of as a storyline? Did you have to go research anything, or right at the top of your head, did you know, oh my God, here's my favorite storylines of all time?
Oh, I mean, right away when you asked me about this, I knew the ones that touched me mentally, just from my childhood of watching throughout the years. So I already knew a bunch that I wanted to chat about now. But my prediction is, amongst the 3 of us, I think Carlos is going to go deep. I think Carlos is going to go deep. He might throw in like some Japan stuff, stuff I've never heard of. I think Joey's going to be in the middle, okay? And I'm probably going to give you your lowest hanging fruit answers.
But listen, I think because we're so similar in age, we grew up in the heyday of wrestling in the 80s and, of course, and then the explosion in the 90s. I can't imagine we're not going to have a couple that are duplicates here. So that's okay. No big deal. I want to hear what your real top 5 storylines of all time are. And it doesn't mean the best storylines, doesn't mean the most impactful. It just means like, holy shit, you kind of remember that. You remember what it meant, as it was going on, whether it was to the pop culture world or to you, whatever it was. All right, let's dive in. But before we dive in, I got to, of course, pitch out some of our merch. We got our merch on Amazon.com. You can buy Top 5 with Joey Cassata t-shirts on Amazon.com. We got the Ernie shirt. We got the Doc Monster shirt. 2 of my co-hosts, all available on Amazon.com. Just type in Top 5 with Joey Cassata. All that stuff will pop up. Of course, you can email us at top5withjoeycassata@gmail.com. Give us some feedback. Let us know what you think of these freaky guests I have on here today. Also, at the end of the episode, keep listening. Let us know what you think of our picks. Let us know what you think of the storylines. Send us your favorite wrestling storylines of all time. All right, Carlos.
My question is, where can I get the Joey Cassata nose? I can't find that on Amazon.
Oh, this is a very special edition.
Where can we get that?
Made by my mom back in the day. Very special edition.
We need like a wait till they make YouTube 3D. Then it's really gonna.
There you go.
Your nose
Listen,
coming out to the living room.
We're filming this right before New Year's. Unfortunately, you guys weren't on the short list that got my new limited edition snow globes. I did send one to
nose globes. What?
I did send one to my boy Jericho. He didn't get it yet. He's in Canada, but he thinks possibly bandits might have stolen the snow globe. He literally messaged me last night that he doesn't have it. I sent him the tracking info. I said, asshole, you have it. It's in your mailbox. He goes, the wet bandits might have stolen it. So hopefully he gets it. All right, freak. Let's go. Carlos, what's your number 5? Your number 5 storyline of all time.
Number 5. Let's see. Let's go. Well, number 1 I already have picked. We'll do number 5. I'd have to say, I would probably say it would be between
No between. Give me one.
Okay. Austin and The Rock has to be number 5.
So just their overall feud, right?
The overall feud and everything that led up to it. That was the thing that I loved about that last Attitude Era of wrestling was you didn't have they didn't wrestle every week. They ambushed each other every week, and then the payoff was WrestleMania. So that was the greatest thing about it. Whether they be like The Rock, having a match and Austin would interfere and vice versa, or beat each other up at some wild location and all kind of crazy things happening. But their banter back and forth, not only physically because they were great workers, but also verbally they were great talkers. So their banter back and forth was classic.
I mean, of course. I mean, 2 of the biggest stars in the business ever, and to have them at the same time in the same company was, really something to watch every week. I agree. Love that whole feud between the 2 of them, and something what you said was true, which I don't think they do enough of today. The buildup was so great because they really, even though they laid hands on each other a lot, there wasn't actual matches until the payoffs.
Right.
It wasn't a match on Raw every week. It wasn't a match on SmackDown every week. It was banter every week and maybe a run-in or a punch or something backstage, but it wasn't. To me, the feud always accumulated with let's get our hands on each other inside a ring and settle this. Sometimes in a steel cage. Of course, we know feuds end in a steel cage a lot, but I couldn't agree more. I love the build of them and just the banter back and forth week after week. Good stuff, freak. All right, Rubes. Number 5. What do you got?
All right, number 5 for me. I'm going to have to go with ladies first. I'm going to have to go with Trish and Lita.
Ooh.
Just their entire run together. I think, I mean, we've had obviously iconic female wrestlers before that. Your Wendy Richters, Fabulous Moolah, Medusa, etc., Sherry Martel. But I think Trish and Lita provides the framework of what you see in female wrestling today, in my opinion, because they were doing it back then when you had when female wrestling was all about the pillow fighting and all the sexy bra and panties thing, but they came out with their in-ring ability, just their ability to work the mic and the ability to carry on a storyline that would make the fans, believe in all this stuff. And that whole framework I see today. I don't think you get women's evolution without Trish and Lita. I don't think you get, like Charlotte Flair, Becky Lynch, Sasha Banks without what they've done together, So yeah, number 5 for me goes to Trish Stratus and Lita.
Definitely a great pick. I mean, you're so right. I don't think they were so important to wrestling for women, Trish and Lita, and it came out of nowhere too. It wasn't like now that with the Banks and Charlotte and all that stuff, they knew they started pushing these women more athletic, more storyline based. They were giving these women the time to flourish and build these storylines. Trish and Lita had to fight for that time. They made that time for them because they were so undeniably good. Right. They were so great on screen. They were so great at everything they did. And neither one of them started like that. Lita started she was the manager for, God, who was she with, Carlos? You remember? Like the luchador people, right?
She was, I forgot his name, Aguilar. She was at Aguilar. She was
right.
But she started in Mexico. That's why.
Right, but when they brought her into, when they brought her in the WWE, she was more of a. I mean, she got in a little bit involved in the ring.
She was,
and same thing with Trish. Trish was all TNA, no, wrestling at first. She was all built on storyline and her looks and with Test and all.
But if you look back, actually, it's so funny because female wrestling took a pause because if you look at if you talk about feuds in that aspect. You had Wendy Richter and Moolah. And those were real wrestlers. And then the TNA thing came in, and then they reverted back to women wrestling.
Yeah, but even the Wendy Richters and the Moolahs, I mean, they didn't have even the time that they gave them was nothing like what they were doing, obviously now, of course, and then with Lita and Trish too. They didn't have the athletic ability. They were wrestling, but they weren't, really Moolah, I guess, was, but she wasn't, you didn't look at them and really think, wow, this is equal to the guys on this card. Until Trish and Lita.
Yeah.
Right. Until they came. Until Trish and Lita came. Yeah.
Great one.
I mean, they were right. I mean, now women's matches are like main event.
Yeah. Well, it took America a long time to catch up to Japan and Mexico, where they celebrated women wrestling for ages.
Agreed. All right, let's get back in. All right, so my number 5, I'm going to start big. It's not necessarily one of my favorite things that happened in wrestling, but I think it was, obviously, it's one of the biggest things that ever happened in wrestling. It's one of the most important things that ever happened in wrestling because of what came after it. But I'm going to start with the Montreal Screwjob. Just because, and I don't, the stuff with Brett and the stuff with Shawn, was it a big controversy that they screwed Brett out of the title because he wasn't going to drop it the right way and then he was leaving for WCW? Yeah, I get all that. But what people really forget, and obviously wrestling fans don't forget, but I think the average person average wrestling fan today, younger wrestling fans, forget that from that Montreal Screwjob, Mr. McMahon was born. He became a heel off of that. The screw job happened, and then when Vince goes on the air the following week to explain what happened, he thought he was going to explain it in a way where he was going to be the baby face and Brett screwed Brett, and that whole big famous interview. But what happened was the fans were like, "This guy's an asshole. Look at he's such a pompous prick." And then from that Mr. McMahon character started to develop. And then obviously, it keeps going throughout the whole Austin McMahon feud and all that stuff. But that Montreal screw job opens up the door to kayfabe and to show us who is the owner of we don't even know the owner of WWE at that time. I mean, real wrestling fans probably did, but the audience thinks Vince is an announcer. They don't know that he's the owner and the CEO and all this stuff. They don't know that he has this power. And
Did
now
did we still think it was Jack Tunney?
of course.
Well, he was the president of WWE.
But seriously, as a kid, you don't know Vince McMahon's the owner. I think Jack Tunney, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Vince is the announcer. So when this happens and this opens up the door to kayfabe, and for people who don't know what kayfabe is, Carlos, tell people what kayfabe means.
It's basically just kind of like a true confession thing. Like kayfabe is keeping up the gimmick no matter where you're at. So Undertaker was the king of kayfabe. We just talked about that not too long ago. For 30 years, he never broke character. So wherever you saw him, he was Undertaker. So that means, now, peeking behind the curtain, the kayfabe is broken. Before, that was like a very big no-no in the industry.
Right,
And
but
now
I mean,
now he's just Mark.
Yeah, Vince pulled the curtain behind it. He pulled that curtain wide open, and that was it.
Right, for people who don't, especially younger listeners who don't necessarily understand what we're saying, for the history of wrestling up until the 90s, kayfabe meant keeping the illusion of these characters and the baby faces and the heels, and that everything was on the up and up, that matches weren't scripted and so on and so forth, that wrestling was a full on real sport. Nothing was scripted, nothing was storyline. So you would have heels and baby faces not even allowed to interact outside of the wrestling.
They couldn't travel together.
They couldn't travel together, couldn't room together. You couldn't see them in a bar together because people would say, well, how the hell is the Iron Sheik and Sergeant Slaughter hanging out in a bar together? They can't be they're enemies. They can't be in the bar together. So for years, this thing with kayfabe meant you kept that illusion going. And I think it's really, unfortunate that it broke. I understand how it broke and why it broke, because with today's day and age with the internet, probably could never keep kayfabe again. But it made it more special, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's like it kept you invested as a story, as a watcher, as a fan, and the storytelling back then was really done really well.
Right.
Now with smartphones and everybody's clicking photos of wrestlers together, so it doesn't even matter anymore.
Yeah, listen, I get it.
Strictly entertainment.
I just watched Top Gun Maverick last night. I know it's not real. I know Tom Cruise is an actor in the movie. He's not really Maverick.
Oh, really, Joey? Oh, really?
But what I'm saying is, people who yell that how could you watch wrestling? It's not real. What the hell does that mean? It's a television show. It's scripted. It's a storyline.
Well,
I can watch a movie. I don't have to believe Tom Cruise's Maverick to be invested in the movie and care if he dies or something happens to him. All I have to do is watch and understand that it's a movie.
What do you mean wrestling's not real? What are you talking about? What are you talking about?
Earmuffs, Ruby earmuffs.
Well, it's that's when you tell them Johnny Depp is not really a pirate.
What?
Look, Carlos, Ruby's gonna need therapy after this episode. What's the matter with you? All right, Los, we're back around to you. Number four.
Number four. I would have to say this is going to Lucha Underground now.
Here we go.
Somebody has to say
digging deep.
That's a great show. Have you guys ever watched Lucha Underground? It's awesome. I'd probably have to say Penta and Mil Muertes. So Penta Zero Miedo is in AEW now with the Lucha Brothers, but he started in Lucha Underground, and that was a great show actually. And that was the thing that made me laugh when people said, "Well, wrestling can't go backwards," but Lucha Underground killed it in ratings, and it was basically what WWF was, what WWE was in the '80s. They kept up that kayfabe and they kept up the characters and the story-driven matches. So I always thought that was great, and the way those two worked together was phenomenal. Like Mil Muertes, for a big guy, he flies. So it was always impressive to see him do his thing.
Yeah, Lucha Underground is definitely something I wanted to get into. I just never had the chance to do it. I'm disappointed that I didn't. I know it's off the air now, but freak. On the same note, here's a question. Here's I've been thinking of this recently. Tell me if you think this model would even work today. Rube, you too, of course. So obviously we have all these streaming services, right? Everything we do today is we binge watch, right? Every time there's a new show coming on, everyone binge watches it. They watch 6, 7, 8, 9 episodes in 2 days, and everyone knows the whole season, right? Very rarely are you watching episodic weekly television anymore, right? Why can't wrestling do something like this? And I'm not saying the two big companies right now. I'm not saying AEW or WWE. Why can't a Netflix or a Paramount or an HBO Plus or one of these streaming services do their own wrestling organization, or even one of the existing, whether it's TNA, whether it's maybe a Lucha Underground again? And I don't think Lucha did this, but why can't they film a season? Not do it episodic live tapings and all this stuff. Film a season with storylines, backstage banter, vignettes, all this stuff, script a storyline, 12, 14, 15, 18 episodes, whatever the hell you want to make it, and put it out as a be all end all wrestling season that you can get invested in like any other television show. Why wouldn't this work?
Will there be matches?
Of course.
Will,
Yeah.
will,
Same.
will the matches have audiences? Because you mentioned
Yeah, it could be. Of course, all these could be filmed in front of live audiences. It just has to be. It has to be taped, of course, so everything can air at the same time. Yeah.
Well, Lucha Underground did do that. They just didn't air it all at once because at that point nobody was really doing that. There was still when they were around, everything was still episodes. So they did episodes, but they filmed everything within 2 months. Everything was shot the whole season. And
well, that's
filmed season by season. The seasons of Lucha Underground.
Right. That's what made me even think of it when you mentioned Lucha Underground. I just don't understand. Again, wrestling, in the grand scheme of things, is pretty cheap to film compared to filming Stranger Things or blah, 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 all these other big budget shows. Relatively cheap to film, even if you're paying the roster, you're paying the live events, you're doing all this stuff. Even if you paper the house, you don't make any money on the tapings like a real wrestling event. You paper the house, right? It's relatively cheap to film, even with full blown production. I just think that this is what the wrestling world is missing right now. I want to see a storyline over episodic television like that. I can't follow WWE and AEW because it's too long. There's too many sideshows. The storylines are all over the place. I can't keep up with it because it's too much to consume, and it's too much to wait every week to consume a little bit more.
Right, but also you got to remember shows like Stranger Things and Wednesday and whatever else. Those people are not doing their own stunts. They're not doing their own matches. Like a wrestler has to, like your body can only go through so much abuse within a couple of hours of period. So if you're having
whole different
even
thing.
But a show like Wednesday's not. It's not recorded over a week period. That Wednesday probably took 6 months to record. You can.
But I'm just saying that I mean, well, like I said, Lucha Underground filmed everything within 2 months. So they filmed 2 months and they filmed their whole season.
Right.
So, you do have to give guys a bit of a break in between because, obviously people get hurt, there's injuries,
Of course. Right. I mean,
I don't, yeah.
I just think it's a missed opportunity.
Did do that.
I mean, Joey.
Go ahead.
I think it could happen. I mean, Lucha Underground just didn't get a chance to take off because they killed the network.
Right. All right, Rube, we're up to you. Number 4.
All right, number 4, I'm going to go with the Nature Boy, Ric Flair, and the Dragon, Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. I think what the two of them did together was iconic and amazing. And listen, I just recapped and basically watched what all they did together. The 3 huge matches they did. Chi-Town Rumble, Clash of Champions, and Wrestle War. I think it was just the storyline and their rivalry was just how it was done, how it was written, how it was pulled off. I thought it was just the perfect framework of how to do That's sort of like if you were to do like a trilogy, like I see it as a trilogy. I thought how they did it, how they pulled it off was just amazing. And with the two characters being so different, I mean, everyone knows how Ric Flair is, the very flamboyant character, and Steamboat being the down-to-earth family man sort of thing. That's how they were pitched. That's how they were doing the promos, and they were just battling it out. I thought it was almost like a clinic to me on how to do a storyline like that. And I think it still stands, even just watching it again now, as I did recently, I think it just stands on its own. I think it's definitely got the strong legs.
Absolute great call. So these are, what is this, like 88, 89, right?
Yeah, late 80s.
Yeah. I mean, of course. I mean, obviously, growing up, especially all of us growing up in New York, we were WWF town, right? So, but NWA was always, to me, WWF was always the more cartoony and the cartoons, and I loved it. Don't get me wrong, that was where I lived. But NWA was like this forbidden fruit, this more real, more gutsy, more blood, and all this stuff was going on down there. And I remember the Flair Steamboat feud like it was yesterday. Not so much that I watched it, because we didn't have a lot of access to, Crockett promotions and stuff like that back then. But I lived in the wrestling magazines. I would run to my newsstand every week, and Flair was always on the cover, Steamboat was always on the cover. And the biggest thing that I loved in the wrestling magazines, I loved towards the back, they would have all the rankings. They'd have the NWA champion and then the rankings. They'd have the WWF champion, the rankings. They'd have the AWA champion and the rankings. They'd have the Florida champion and the rankings, so on and so forth. So I would keep up with all these feuds through the wrestling magazines. But this was one of, if not the biggest of that NWA era back then.
And let me just add to that what you just said, because back then, I agree, back then we didn't really have all the access to that as we did to WWF. But we do now. Right. But we do now, and like I just said before, when you watch it now, it still holds up.
Absolutely.
Compared to stuff that's out now, it still holds up, and that's the value of it. Even though I myself included didn't really have access to it back then, I watch it right now, and I'm thinking, wow, this holds up on its own. It's almost timeless to me.
Oh, literally every night in bed, what I do is I'm on the WWE network and I'm watching all this old footage. What I would love them to do more of, and I know they do it a little bit periodically, I want them to build spots of these feuds and these storylines as an all-encompassing doc. It doesn't have to be with interviews and stuff, but they should put storylines and timelines together with all the vignettes and all the backstage interviews, all the lead-ups, not just click on this match on this pay-per-view, click on this match on this event. I want to see all the in-between stuff is really where the storylines build. You know what I mean? Flair I think a lot of stuff with Steamboat. Son was involved, and all that little stuff of that feud. Yeah. You could find it, but you'd have to know exactly where and when that aired on every little episode. If they put all that stuff in one little box and said, here's the Flair Steamboat trilogy, beginning to end, not only the matches, but all the stuff in between, it would be epic.
Yeah.
Nice, Rube.
I mean,
great one.
The time capsule would be great.
Yep. All right, so I'm going to go with my number 4 is maybe it's not as famous to us, and it wasn't even in my radar when I was a kid, but now looking back at it as an adult, and I got to really dive into this storyline more, it's one of the most important storylines in wrestling history, because it really brought wrestling to the mainstream. And I'm talking about the Jerry Lawler, Andy Kaufman feud.
On April 5th, 1982, in Memphis, Tennessee, Andy Kaufman, the actor, comedian, and intergender wrestling champion, had his first wrestling match with a member of his own sex. The opponent was a very serious wrestling favorite named Jerry Lawler. Tonight, for the first time on network television, they meet face-to-face. Here are Andy Kaufman and Jerry Lawler. When I see Jerry here, I've never seen the man in person before. To me, you'd have to be nuts to to want to get into the ring with this guy. He appears to be maybe twice your weight. What was your motivation for wanting to fight him?
Well, I had so many matches with women, and I always won, and I started really believing that I was a good wrestler. So I don't know, I'd beaten women bigger than him. I really thought that I could beat him. And I also, when I started getting worried and thinking maybe I couldn't beat him, I thought I would just run away from him the whole time, and I couldn't do that.
Now, a sportsmanlike thing to do. But everybody that sees Andy Kaufman the way he is now, you know, Mr. Nice Guy, very lovable, the Latka character and everything. This is not the Andy Kaufman that I saw, because he sent a lot of interviews and clips into Memphis insulting me.
As I recall, Andy, you kind of just egged him into this, didn't you?
I was just teasing and fun. My father said, my manager said, they all said that I had a right, I could have gotten a lawyer and I could have sued you for what you did, and I didn't. And all I want is an apology. Even you asked me last time I was on your show if I was going to have a lawsuit, and I could have sued you. I could have sued you for everything you're worth. Well, and I didn't, because I'm not that kind of a guy.
Yeah. You know what?
Oh, absolutely.
So, again, as a kid, that's Memphis wrestling. I know nothing about any of this. This is even a little earlier than my watch history. This is 1982. I started watching in 83. Midway through 83, I started going to Madison Square Garden every month to go see wrestling. But this is 82. So this is way off my radar. Out of the wrestling magazines already since by the time I start getting all the magazines. But when I look back at the history of wrestling, and I really did a lot of research and watched wrestling, you know, the rest of my life, this storyline is so important because Andy Kaufman is obviously a big star. He's on Taxi every week on national television. And he gets involved in wrestling only because he's a big wrestling fan. And the storyline with Lawler and Memphis wrestling, he becomes the intergender champion, which is a big deal back then. He's literally wrestling women in Memphis wrestling. Finally, Lawler, who is, you know, the face of Memphis wrestling, has enough, and he kind of confronts Andy Kaufman, and they have this back and forth that goes on for months. Kaufman fakes an injury, and then, you know, obviously it climaxes on that big David Letterman appearance where kayfabe is at its all-time high. Andy Kaufman and Jerry Lawler are on David Letterman, a national television talk show, and you think these guys absolutely hate each other. And it climaxes with Andy Kaufman mouthing off to Lawler, and Lawler slapping Kaufman so hard that he goes flying over the chair. And it's so real that, you know, it brought wrestling, I think, really into the spotlight. Yep.
I just YouTube that Letterman clip, man. It's hilarious. I mean, you don't know. You don't know if it's real or not. You know, it's just it really is.
Yeah.
It really is played off real, and you could actually believe it to be real. That's how well it was done.
Well, the funny thing is, for me, you know, I grew up in a wrestling family. So like when my father and the other workers would get together, they'd be talking about all this stuff. So even though we didn't have access to it, a lot of those guys did work there or were there when that stuff was going on. So I've always had a bit of an insight, a tiny bit of an insight of what was going on and stuff we couldn't watch because, again, we didn't have access to Memphis and not NWA, AWA, like New Japan. We didn't have. Now you can stream that on anything, but you know, before it was so limited. But yeah, we would have these. My father, I would sneak in and hear my father and the other guys having these kind of conversations, which is always kind of funny. So I always had a little bit of an insight on that. But I love that feud was by far one of the best examples of kayfabe ever.
Oh. I mean, I heard stories. I mean, there's an Andy Kaufman doc. There's that movie Man on the Moon. That's where I really learned about this storyline in general. But this reports like after he got injured the first time with Lawler, he went to the hospital for like weeks and played it off that he was hurt in the hospital for weeks. Andy Kaufman,
but he was the neck brace. Yeah.
But he lived it every day out of his mind. Like to the scope where Lawler even thought, "Holy shit, is this guy really hurt? What's going on?" That's how much kayfabe that he was keeping Andy Kaufman back in the day. He was insane and incredible.
Yeah, yeah. genius, actually.
Yep. All right, back to you, Los, number 3.
Oh man, I'm gonna piggyback off the Ric Flair thing. Ric Flair and Dusty Rhodes.
Yeah.
The rich man versus the son of the plumber. And that was amazing. And the way they set that all up with the 4 horsemen jumping poor Dusty in the parking lot, breaking his arm, like that man, that if you ever seen a group of people infuriated at Flair, that was the time, because he picked on this poor guy who was making a living, as the son of a plumber and now a wrestler. And Dusty Rhodes, I mean, God, he looked like a California raisin, right? God bless the guy. He did not look like the sculpted wrestler that Flair was at that point. So, for him, and then it took all 4 of the horsemen to take this guy down. But I mean, that just everything leading up to that, and I mean, and the matches alone. I mean, Dusty Rhodes, what a hell of a worker, man, and a hell of a booker too. He was amazing. So that's got to be my pick for that.
Rube, what do you think about this one?
It was either this or the one with the dragon. Great choice. But it may or may not be an honorable mention.
It's so funny you just said that, because it's actually one of my honorable mentions too. So this one, for me, again, obviously Flair and Dusty is so perfect, because like you said, Flair is this flamboyant money guy, and Dusty comes off as, like you said, the son of the plumber, out of shape, just an everyday man, right? And to me, the beginning of this storyline, and it's really, to me, almost the origin of the Horsemen too. And I think it was Flair versus Nikita in a cage, and I forget the year, probably 84 or 5, I think. Flair and Nikita in a cage. Flair wins, but Nikita and Ivan Koloff jump Flair after the match, start beating him up. Dusty Rhodes comes to Flair's rescue, and the crowd goes crazy. They're super happy. Dusty comes to the rescue, beats up the Russians. The Russians fly out of the ring, but the other swerve, Arn and Ole come down. They trap Dusty in the ring. Flair, Arn, and Ole beat up Dusty, and that's when they almost break his leg. And that was really the beginning of the Horsemen. They turn on Dusty, and there's, it's part of one of the documentaries on WWE Network. They tell the story how they're in a cage, and when they're beating up Dusty, the crowd is so infuriated that they're trying to get to the Horsemen, who aren't even called the Horsemen yet. They're trying to get to Flair and the Andersons, and they want to kill them because of what they're doing to Dusty in the cage. And they say how the cage almost saved their life that night. Great stuff. I mean, Flair Dusty is the best. I mean, the blood alone in that feud, the 2 of them with their blonde hair.
Oh God,
how can you beat it, right?
The way those guys beat like stuck pigs, man.
Oh, it's the best.
As a mild footnote to this, I remember when Joey, you first started joining the band, when you first joined Kiss Nation, you would just, like, as often as Ace Frehley would say "ack," you would just go woo, woo
everywhere,
all the time. I'm like, what the hell is wrong with this guy?
That was on his answering machine too, on his phone. That was on your phone. It was a phone message.
That was my voicemail for 20 years.
For a while,
yeah,
that's all you can say. Woo!
And again, growing up in the Northeast, I wasn't that exposed to Flair, but Flair was like this forbidden fruit. Like you didn't get to see him that much, but everything you saw of him, you loved. He was, like he says, the man.
Oh, Becky Lynch is now, but never mind.
Well, that's disputed. Flair, I think Flair's taking them to court for that, right? All right, Rube, back to you. Number 3.
Number 3, I think we're going to have our first repeat. And number 3 for me is definitely The Rock and Stone Cold. For many of the same reasons that Los mentioned earlier. I think they are the most iconic rivalry in that era. I think they were just such a foundation, the 2 of them, for, again, not only their in-ring ability, but for, their characters, their mics, their mic ability, their promos. I don't know if you guys watch The Rock show Young Rock, but whenever they do a flashback sequence of 90s version of Rock, there's Stone Cold right there, and I'm like, oh, I want them to talk more about that history they have there. The two of them together was just like dynamite, and it's iconic, and that's why they're my number 3.
Yeah, I mean, obviously those two together on screen. God, what better TV can you see? Not only in ring stuff, but on just them yelling at each other. It's just every week was absolute gold. We talk about Flair Dusty and Flair Steamboat and all these real big feuds. Rock Austin, maybe if you really think about it, never was there two bigger stars that had that storyline together.
And I don't think one of them overshadowed the other. They were
Agreed.
just so on each other's level.
Yeah.
Okay. Neither of them was like flinched at each other. They were just on par, on game, the two of them, face to face all the time.
Agreed. Awesome one. Yep. Obviously repeat, but let's keep it real. That's got to be on your list. I love it. All right. So my number 3, this really might be technically my favorite storyline. I didn't put it at number 1, but just because I think there's a couple that are bigger for the wrestling business. But this one, especially for me as a kid. So obviously we all know the Hogan-Andre saga, right? Hogan's my guy growing up. Oh, Thunder Lips right there on my shirt. Hogan's everything to me. But
Which
Hogan
was your email for a long time.
Oh, yeah. That's what do you mean? It still is. And Hogan's my guy growing up. But Hogan, people don't remember, he was unbeatable. Even the King Kong Bundys and the Big John Studs and the one-man gangs and all these guys, yes, they were big and they were bad, but you never actually thought Hogan was losing. That's how big he was during his run starting in 84 in the WWF, okay? Andre, of course, was the only guy bigger than life, even over Hogan at this time. So when he turns heel, to me, it's one of the greatest things ever. But that's not the storyline I'm going for. I'm going to fast forward a little bit. So we know the storyline. Andre turns heel, challenges Hogan at WrestleMania. Hogan body slams him for the pin. The wrestling world forgets. They think that's the end of the storyline. Hogan wins at WrestleMania. Andre's the vanquished, villain. He's gone forever. No way. Something to me even bigger happens. So later on, there's a rematch, the WrestleMania 3 rematch, live on the main event, which used to be Saturday night's main event. Broadcast television, Channel 4, NBC television, it turned into the biggest wrestling event of all time, most viewed wrestling event of all time. The main event, it was the Hogan-Andre rematch from WrestleMania 3, which everyone forgets about. Now, the match wasn't a lot to be talked about. Andre was hurting at this point, but at the end of the match, to me, this is where the best storyline of all time comes in. Andre falls on Hogan. 1, 2. Hogan clearly gets his shoulder up. Ref counts 3. Andre is the new champion. All of a sudden, there's two refs in the ring. Twin referees in the ring. Ted DiBiase is in the corner of Andre the Giant. Andre the Giant relinquishes, he made a bad promo here, but he relinquishes the WWF Championship belt to Ted DiBiase because he paid Andre to go get it for him from Hogan, right? Now, technically, Andre won, but DiBiase is the new champion because Andre gives him the championship because he got paid off to do it. There's 2 refs in the ring. Hogan's losing his mind. There's twin referees. We don't know what happened. But obviously he got screwed because the one referee was paid off by Ted DiBiase. The real ref, who was trapped in the back, they sabotaged him. They wouldn't let him out to the ring. The storyline goes, Hogan's promo backstage is classic, screaming, How much did DiBiase pay for the plastic surgery to get the ref to look like the other ref? Now, obviously, we know, flash forward, no kayfabe. Earl Hebner and what's the other guy's name, Carlos? You remember? Earl and Dave Hebner were really twin brothers that they used in this storyline. But the storyline goes, Hogan thinks that DiBiase got plastic surgery on another ref to screw him out of the world title. I mean, Jesus Christ, if this is not soap opera TV at its best, I don't know what is. As a kid, my jaw is like this. I can't believe what I'm looking at on television watching this and then hearing that DiBiase, and I believe all of it, DiBiase paid for plastic surgery to have this ref screw Hogan out of the title. Greatest thing ever.
Now, from our point of view, was the quote unquote real ref, was Dave the real ref, and Earl was like the mystery twin?
I think the opposite, right? Possibly the opposite. Right, because I think Earl was the more veteran ref, and Earl was the guy.
Earl was their household name.
Right, Earl was the guy who screwed Brett out of the title too, right? At the Montreal Screwjob.
Earl was he was the household.
He was the main ref, and then Dave was like the secondary guy. So I think, again, I don't know for sure, but God, what a storyline!
That was a good storyline. That was a good one.
And people forget it because they think, all the wrestling rewrites history, right? WWE rewrites their own history. Yeah. The body slam at WrestleMania is the end of that feud. They put a button on it. No, this main event, this rematch was bigger than ever because really what people don't realize is Hogan's the champion from 84 straight through all of this. This is the first time the title comes off of Hogan. It's before Warrior beats him. It's before all that. This is when the title comes off of Hogan.
Everybody's jaws drop. Yeah.
Right. And it opens
whole wrestling world gasp.
It opens up the whole wrestling gamut for all the other competitors because Hogan goes off and films some movies, I think, at this time, and they vacate the title and they do the tournament at the next WrestleMania where obviously we know Macho gets it, right? Macho gets it, and then Flair gets it after that. But right. So incredible storyline. That's my number 3. Had to do it. All right, Los, back to you. Number 2.
Number 2. All right, Road Warriors and Powers of Pain.
Wow. Oh yeah.
It wasn't anything beautiful. It was King Kong versus Godzilla. 4 fucking guys beefing, just destroying each other. Just nothing but sides of beef in the ring and blood everywhere. But they really, that was the first time the Road Warriors ever really challenged physically.
Right.
When it came to tag team wrestling, because before the 4 Horsemen gave them a bit of little trouble because there was always four horsemen over them. But and then a few people here and there, but nobody physically challenged the Road Warriors the way the Powers of Pain physically challenged.
Carlos, remind people who the Powers of Pain were.
The Powers of Pain, basically, it ended up being Warlord and Haku, but not Haku. Who was the
Barbarian, right?
Barbarian,
right? Warlord and Barbarian.
Right. And they basically were carbon copies of the Road Warriors. And the thing that ruined the Road Warrior Demolition feud was Powers of Pain went to WWE first, and they did that whole run with Demolition. So by the time Road Warriors went to WWE, it doesn't matter. And everybody's always like, Road Warriors Demolition, that was great. I was like, no, they fought a handful of times at that.
Right.
And at that time, Crush was in there, Axe was on his way out. So that was, they missed the boat on that. But Powers of Pain was really the only tag team at that time, like where they handcuffed Animal, and it was really just like they pushed the barbell, and they supposedly cracked the socket of his eye, and all. Like they were the only guys who gave them this kind of. Yeah, so nobody ever gave them this hard time, because before then they were just running through everybody. I mean, their matches were like maybe 5 minutes long, if that. They would go in and beat the hell out of you and leave. So to me, that was my King Kong versus Godzilla, and Road Warriors are always going to be my favorite tag team.
No, that's a great pick, because it's something that I totally forgot about too. Obviously I think Road Warriors, I think NWA, but when they were in WWE, you're right. I think in my brain tricks me to think of obviously Demolition Road Warriors. But you're right, that didn't happen as much as we think it happened because of Warlord and Barbarian at the time were basically WWE's version of the Road Warriors. Nice.
Yeah.
Nice pick.
Well, they hired them first, and then they did that run with Demolition.
Right. Nice. All right, Rubes, back to you. Number 2.
Number 2 is I guess, a little bit of a repeat, but I want to broaden it a little bit more. I'm talking about the entire career feud rivalry between Bret the Hitman Hart and Heartbreak Kid Shawn Michaels, which includes, as you mentioned, the screw job as well. But that just led to the two of them with HBK, Heartbreak Kid, Shawn Michaels being like Vince's golden boy, and he was cocky, not only in the ring, but behind the scenes as well. And Bret, with his real life struggles in regards to his unhappiness of where he fit in WWE at the time, him being a veteran and really probably just not having the best taste for Shawn at all in real life. And this just played out perfectly in regards to creativity, in regards to the feud writing throughout their career, which you still see documentaries about this now. You still see like documentaries of them like reuniting, and sometimes, well, is it still real? Do they still feel animosity towards each other? Whatever. I mean, that's how strong this rivalry was. You don't see documentaries now or people worrying if The Rock and Stone Cold still hate each other.
Right.
But with HBK and Hitman, it's still, it was that touchy, It was that touchy. It wasn't maybe as flamboyant as The Rock and Stone Cold, but it felt a lot more real than that, because partially it was.
It was, right.
There was a lot of tension there for sure, and it played out outside behind the camera for sure.
Yeah.
You felt their tension with it, and it was like a real. These guys really hate each other. Like you thought they were going to rip each other apart.
Right. Yeah.
That was a great pick. Yeah, one or two of my favorite wrestlers of all time.
Definitely great pick. There's nothing better in wrestling when you're not sure. Again, we talk about kayfabe a million times already today. When you're not sure if something's real or not. If you're not sure, do these guys really hate each other? Do these guys really have tension? Because when there's real tension, anything can happen. That's why live TV is so great, right? Because anything can happen at any moment. But a little backstory with the Shawn Bret stuff. To me, I always think about too, like what led to all that stuff. So I don't, people don't realize too. I think Bret and Shawn never even see the light of day if it's not for the steroid trial, right? So obviously WWE is the big monster organization, Hogan and Andre and King Kong Bundy and all these jacked up guys Vince loved, right? He never pushed the little guys. Shawn and Bret have been in the WWE for 10 years already at this point. Bret was on the WrestleMania 1 card. So these guys are buried as tag team people and undercard guys. And it wasn't until the steroid trial where, Vince was accused of distributing steroids to all the wrestlers where they had to stop juicing. They had to stop pushing the bigger guys. And Hogan leaves the company. And all these other guys get this opportunity. And it starts with Bret and Shawn. And it's great because two guys that would never have had that opportunity became two of the biggest stars in history of wrestling.
Good point. That's a great point, actually. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because at that point it was land of the dinosaurs. So anybody 6 foot and under got to get a push.
They were going leaner. They were going after the trial. They were going leaner. Yeah.
No, they had no choice, because at that point those are the only guys that weren't juicing up.
Right. Vince had to show his organization wasn't just these, poster child, these big roided up guys. It was guys like Shawn and Bret, and it worked. It worked great. It just shows you that, the vision that Vince always had or someone else doesn't have doesn't always work. You got to give people opportunities to get in front of the camera to build storylines. And Shawn and Bret prove that to be a fact. All right, killer number 2. All right, my number 2. Again, I got to go back to the Hulkster. Everyone knows that I love Hulk. I was out of wrestling for a little while, and it's kind of during the years you're talking about, Rubes. During these early 90s, I got out of wrestling a little bit just because, I don't know, became more serious about music and stuff, and I don't know, I just didn't have time for wrestling that much come 89, 90, 91, 92. What got me immersed back in, and I think it got a lot of people immersed back in, Bash at the Beach, 1996. Hogan is now in WCW. He's a babyface, comes out to the rescue of the Macho Man. Hall and Nash have been invading from the WWE. They're beating up Macho, they're beating up Sting. Hogan comes out, and so Hall and Nash against Macho, Sting, and Luger? Right? Macho, Sting, and Luger, I think, right? Against Hall and Nash. And Hall and Nash had a mystery partner that they weren't revealing. Hogan comes out to the rescue, never thinking that he's the third man on that side, goes into the ring, and the best heel turn in the history of the business, from my take, Hogan turns heel. Nobody saw it coming. The NWO is formed, and the rest is history. The 90s wrestling explosion happens. Wrestling becomes more realistic, more gritty. WWE has Doink the Clown and Repo Man at this time, and they're forced to become more. They're forced to.
Repo Man. Repo Man. That was Smash. That was Smash.
That was Smash, right? They're forced to become more realistic, which creates Austin and The Rock. So that Hogan heel turn sets all this in motion with the WWE going more realistic with Austin and Rock and all these other angles. And obviously it creates the Monday Night Wars. And to me, it's one of the biggest moments in wrestling.
Oh yeah. I mean, that was by far the most shocking moment in wrestling.
That's right.
To see Hogan actually team up with heels. And supposedly Hogan wanted to do this kind of flip at the end of the Warrior match. And Vince said nobody would buy him as a heel.
Wow.
I mean, man, talk about missing the boat. That would have been just
how epic would that have been if he hits the Warrior after that? Oh.
That's yeah. And
I mean, me and Ruby were just talking about that. Would have been the best part of that match.
Yeah, exactly.
I like that match.
You liked a lot of the hand holding.
Listen, no joking around. I will take the test of strength in the middle of the ring for 3 minutes with the heel, hitting the guy in the nuts at the end over high fly luchadors all day. That, to me, that's a storyline. I don't want to see a guy. You know why? Because everyone's like, "Oh, but the luchadors, they're much more real, and the high flyers, it's real." Horse shit. What's more real? Test the strength in the ring, or a guy doing a flip over the top rope, and there's 9 wrestlers on the outside of the ring waiting to catch him like this? It's ridiculous.
That's where the disconnect is. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's more of an American thing. That's been happening since they came here. Like the waiting. In Mexico, there's no waiting. It's just they fly over the ropes, they hit you. Over here, they're like, it's basically, you may as well have the guy from the airport with the flashlight.
Right, it's terrible, right? So I'm all about build. I don't care if it looks real or not. I want storyline in the ring. I don't care if you can do a freaking 8 somersault thing off the top rope, and it means nothing to me. I'll take a punch in the nuts over that any day. All right, killer. So where are we? We're up to Los's number 1, right?
Number 1.
Let me recap, Los. Hold on. We got number 5, Austin Rock. Number 4, Lucha Underground, Pentaverse Mil Muertes, right?
Yep.
Number 3, Flair, Dusty Rhodes. Number 2, Road Warriors, Power of Pain. Great pick. Number 1, favorite wrestling storyline of all time. Give it to me.
Honestly, I know I'm sure it's going to be said to death. Andre Hogan.
Yeah.
Andre Hogan, man. The build-up, not the match, obviously was great because Andre was in good health at that point as well. But just the build-up of when he came out with Bobby Heenan and the gasp
Oh.
of the fans and Hogan's face and the dialogue, and when he rips the shirt across, and then fast forward to when Piper's finally hounding him for an answer, and he roars yes, and the crowd goes bananas.
Oh.
I mean, just that whole thing. And that's why I always say, it's as much, and I agree with you. Listen, wrestlers today, highly skilled, amazing. I mean, they're doing stuff that wasn't done, that nobody even dreamed of 20 years ago. However, nothing trumps a good storyline. I don't care what anybody says. Nothing trumps a good storyline. And that was proof positive. Because if you watch WrestleMania, Savage and Steamboat steal the night, man. That's a wrestling clinic. But everybody forgets that when these two bohemians step in the ring. And again, the match isn't pretty, but the back and forth, because Andre finally turned heel and turned on his best friend. They were buddies, and that emotional connection is why everybody goes back to that match, because it wasn't because of Andre and Hogan. And again, it's not like now where if that was a feud, they'd wrestle every week until WrestleMania,
Right?
And then it loses its luster.
Loses
So
its
at this
luster, of course.
Yeah. So at this point, Andre's coming out and choking Hogan. Hogan's fucking coming out and hitting Andre. They're protecting Hacksaw Jim Duggan, and they're running, and they're doing all this stuff. And then when they finally get this payoff, and people are throwing trash at Andre at the end of WrestleMania. But
that Andre
ultimate
chokehold when he gets those big hands around your neck. To me, there's nothing more believable than that. Jesus Christ, when he has Hogan like that, and all the wrestlers are trying to get him off Hogan's throat, it's great.
Yeah. I mean,
that
to me was always going to be one of my favorites.
The build-up of that. Remember with the trophies, Hogan got the big trophy. Andre's trophy was smaller, and they were like, "Well, why is your trophy smaller than Hogan's?" You could see the seeds being planted every week on. Oh, it was God. What a great build-up! What a great storyline!
And at that time, Heenan was like the godfather of wrestling. Yeah. So if any wrestler showed up with Heenan, that was a problem. That was like the mafia showing up at your door.
Yep. You knew bad things would happen if Heenan was next to you.
Yes.
Killer. Yeah.
That's always going to be my number one.
I can't dispute that. Rubes, up to your number one. Let me recap. Number 5, Trish and Lita. Number 4, Flair Steamboat. Number 3, Rock Austin. Number 2, Brett and Shawn. And your number one storyline of all time is...
My number one storyline may or may not be the greatest storyline in wrestling history, but it is the one. The reason why it's the number one is the one that affected me most as a fan, especially as I watched it. And it's still to this day, when I think about it, I remember how I felt when it happened. And I am talking about the Mega Powers exploding.
Thank God someone did it. It's not my number one. I'm so glad you did it. Go.
Okay.
That was a great one.
The Mega Powers involved Hulk Hogan, Randy Macho Man Savage, and at that time, their shared manager, Miss Elizabeth. And at that time in the 80s, the two most popular wrestlers was basically Hulk Hogan and Macho Man Randy Savage. And to me, as a young viewer, it was like watching Superman and Batman together. Okay, they were they were 1 and 2 all the time. And when they got together, and when Hulk came out, I guess it was like at the end of WrestleMania 4 at the tournament, and helped Macho Man win the title, and they become friends. As simple as that storyline might sound now, to a kid, I'm like, oh my God, they're friends now. They're gonna be like,
it was that big. Yeah.
It was like the best thing ever for a young fan for me. I didn't know at that time that whole storyline was meant for them to actually fail a year later. But just to see them two together and that whole journey, and even when you saw like the slow build of the planting of the seeds of discontent there, particularly with that focused on pretty much Macho Man's real life over jealousy and overprotectiveness of Elizabeth, they brought that into the storyline, and they used that as the anchor of how to make the mega powers explode. For instance, when Elizabeth was wearing the gold dress and like her gold skirt came down, whatever, and Hulk lifted her on her shoulders, and you saw Macho Man being upset. You know, as a kid, I'm like, no, Randy, don't be mad, Randy.
Right. He doesn't mean anything by that, right?
It doesn't mean anything by that. And when that big night happened at Saturday night's main event, when I guess it was Elizabeth got injured or whatever, and Hulk left Randy in the ring. Hulk carried Elizabeth, wanted to make sure Elizabeth was okay. Hulk felt betrayed. I mean, Randy felt betrayed because Hulk, left Randy, and that was it. Based on the storyline, according to the storyline, that was the final nail in the coffin. And when Hulk came back to try to join the match, you just saw Macho Man just totally just flip out and just slap the heck out of Hogan.
Yeah, Hulk is like Batman. He creates all his own villains.
That was it. And then you see the quote unquote behind the scenes footage in like the medical room with Elizabeth on the bed. And you see a Macho Man putting his finger at Hogan. You
got lust in your eyes.
Got lust in your eyes. Da, 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 da. And then he just slams him with the belt. That's it. It was over, and my heart broke. I was like, no, because it was less than a year ago that I saw that iconic handshake between the madness and the mania. You know what I'm talking about. As a kid, I ate all that up, and then a year later, man, he slams Hogan with the title. I'm like, oh man, I was totally heartbroken. And then it was the decision for WrestleMania 5. Who's corner would Elizabeth stand by? Would she stand by Macho Man? Would she stand by Hulk Hogan? And that was just, to me, that's my number one feud, my number one rivalry, because it still affected me emotionally as a kid. That's why I love it so much.
Storytelling 101. They built that up, like you said. They know a year earlier where that's going. You got to build the storyline backwards. You got to know, okay, where do we need to get to? They knew, same as always, Hogan doesn't have a rivalry. He doesn't have a guy that he can fight and challenge him for the title. Let's build this storyline for a year with this other big baby face, Macho Man, and let's build this storyline with these superpowers connecting, the mega powers, if you will, and the slow build of these two guys, the way they did it with Elizabeth, of course, hanging in the balance, Hogan accidentally putting his hand on Elizabeth's butt on that one scene when she's on Macho's shoulder, and they freeze frame it on like the next episode, and Macho's looking at it, going crazy. The way they did it and the real life jealousy that Macho had, his acting didn't need to be that far-fetched because he was really that jealous. And, you hear horror stories of Macho locking Elizabeth in the locker room by herself, not allowed to interact with people backstage, and all these crazy stories about how he was really that jealous of Elizabeth. So this storyline, and again, Macho and Elizabeth at that time were the president and first lady of wrestling, if you will. They were everything. And when Hogan comes back and joins this to make this trio, it's the biggest thing in wrestling, history at that time. And then when they break up, God, kids all lost their minds all over the world, and I was one of them.
I was totally one of them, man. I was heartbroken, dude.
When we got to our number ones and no one picked Mega Powers yet, I was like, holy, how could we not have Mega Powers?
When you asked me to do this, I knew Mega Powers was my number one. Mega Powers was my number one immediately.
So we're up to my number one. So Mega Powers, incredible pick, of course. So let me recap mine so far. Mine, number 5, Montreal Screwjob. Number 4, Lawler, Andy Kaufman. Number 3, the Twin Refs. How much did he pay for the plastic surgery? Number 2, the formation of the NWO, Hogan's heel turn. And my number 1 storyline of all time. Now, this one, To me, I really believe there's no bigger storyline in wrestling history because I don't think the WWF, WWE is where it is today without this storyline.
Where's Carlos going?
I think he might have to run. Freak, if you got to run, just go. We'll finish up. So this storyline.
Yeah, I got to head out.
Go, Freak.
I love how he's frozen like that.
Perfect. Let's leave him on the screen like that. So this storyline, and I'll do a little build up to it. So obviously 1983, end of 83, Hulk Hogan comes into the WWF off of his run in AWA, off of Rocky 3. Vince is starting to build the WWF into a national promotion. Now, this storyline to me is the only thing that could make what he wanted a reality. And it starts with the small little clip of Captain Lou Albano in a little video called Girls Just Want to Have Fun on MTV. So this little clip, nobody thinks anything of it. Obviously, Cyndi Lauper is one of the biggest stars on the planet at this time. Wrestling manager Captain Lou Albano appears in her video as her father. Again, little throwaway. No one thinks anything of it.
It's a mess.
This slow build of Captain Lou coming out on WWE television every week, in Piper's Pit, and proclaiming that he is actually Cyndi Lauper's manager, and he is the reason for her success, and he wrote all the lyrics to her songs. He wrote all the music. This slow storyline, you're not thinking anything of it, but what happens is Cyndi Lauper gets involved in this storyline, and she appears on Piper's Pit to dispute, of course, that she is, that Captain Lou is her manager. No, she said, he's just a guy in the video. I met him, and he's a friend of mine, and I just had him appear in the video. It erupts. The end of Piper's Pit. Cyndi Lauper's beating up Roddy and Captain Lou with her purse. And what happens is it all cumulates with this big wrestling event on MTV called The Brawl to End It All. Now, this was, to me, the big bang, if you want, of the rock and wrestling explosion, which really creates Hulkamania. It creates WrestleMania. It creates the WWF that we know and love. Creates
MTV
action,
had a lot to do with that.
everything. At that time, Brawl to Settle It All, and I just looked this up last night, was the most watched program in MTV history. And all they aired was one match. Wasn't even Hogan. They aired Wendy Richter versus the Fabulous Moolah with Cyndi Lauper and Wendy Richter's corner. Richter wins the title, and it becomes the biggest event in MTV history. Of course, after that, MTV says, oh my God, we got to partner with the WWF at the time. And they create this partnership, and they do another pay-per-view, if you will, or national release program, and they air The War to Settle the Score. And that's the storyline building up for an extra few months. Piper's now involved. Hogan is now involved. And The War to Settle the Score is Hogan versus Piper. Piper has Orndorff in his corner, and Hogan has Cyndi Lauper in his corner. Captain Lou is now a good guy because Piper turns on Captain Lou, and so on and so forth. But it all builds to The War to Settle the Score on MTV. Again, biggest event in cable history at that time. And that leads directly into WrestleMania 1. Now, the storyline of Vince saying, oh, he put all his money into WrestleMania 1. He didn't know if it was going to be a success. The company would have went under if WrestleMania 1 is not a success. I think that's all horseshit, to tell you the truth. With the success of the MTV War to Settle the Score and Brawl to End It All, he knows WrestleMania is going to be the be-all, end-all event. He knows everyone, wrestling fans and pop culture fans, now MTV generation fans, are tuning in to see this event at WrestleMania. You got Mr. T involved now. You got all these celebrities. But the stuff with Cyndi Lauper leading up to WrestleMania 1, to me, creates what we know as the Rock and Wrestling Connection and the WWF as we know it.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, I think Vince, obviously it's been said a million times before, Vince is and was a genius, is a genius back then with tapping in to MTV, which was just in its birthing stages, but it attracted the market that Vince wanted for wrestling, and just being a union with MTV was a genius move, genius. And yes,
Perfectly said. Again, up to this point, people don't remember, but up to this point, wrestling fans are kind of like, drunk guys and grandmas, and that's what the wrestling fan base is. You look back at old footage of the Garden of Bruno selling out the Garden. It's not what you see today of kids and families. It's a different
holding up action figures.
No, it's a totally different audience. This storyline opens up the whole world to wrestling, pop culture, these bigger than life superheroes that are on screen that you could really root for. It's not Superman in a comic book. It's not Batman. It's not the Hulk. It's real life guys in real life storylines with bigger than life personas, bigger than life physiques that you could watch every week, root for the villain, root for the bad guy, and, hiss at the villain. And it just creates the new brand of what we know as wrestling today during this MTV era. And to me, that's really what starts it. This stupid appearance by Captain Lou in Cyndi Lauper's video.
Girls just want to have fun.
Yeah, it starts everything. Without MTV, none of this happens. WrestleMania 1 doesn't happen. All these, the whole crossover branding maybe never happens without MTV getting involved, and they only get involved because of Cyndi Lauper. Even MTV, I think at the time, doesn't know what the hell wrestling is. They're just like, okay, we'll air this because Cindy's in it.
We would never have Logan Paul in WWE.
But we would never have any of this stuff. None of this stuff would be happening because it wouldn't be accepted, because back in the 70s and early 80s, wrestling was more of this underground type thing. Even though it was blowing up, Bruno sold the Garden out more than anyone ever. It was still more of an underground, weird type of thing that people loved. It wasn't a mainstream pop culture type phenomenon that it becomes after this.
Great choice. Numero uno.
So we lost that freak Los he had to run. But let's do a quick honorable mention before we wrap this up, Rube. What do you got? I know we both said one of our honorable mentions was the Flair, Dusty stuff. But you got another one for me?
Yeah, I'm thinking. I was thinking CM Punk and John Cena, especially with that notorious pipe bomb speech that Cena makes, and that just elevates the importance and the quote unquote reality of the Cena Punk match in that upcoming WrestleMania. And I just rewatched the pipe bomb speech, and boy, he's sitting down, and Punk is just unleashing on the company. And I'm thinking, and you're thinking, is this real? Is this not real? Is it real? Is this his true feelings whatsoever? And because he just name calls like everybody that's important back at that time, and I think it's an important storyline, important feud, important rivalry, and that's why it's definitely one of my honorable mentions.
Great choice. You're so right with Punk. So Punk, I mean, listen, I know he's hard to work with. I hear horror stories about that. You just can't work with this guy. He's a cancer to the locker room, so on and so forth. But he brought back that realism that you didn't know what he was going to say, when he was going to say it, who he was going to call out. You didn't know if he was really hated by the company, if he really hated the company. You didn't know any of this stuff. This ambiguity of Punk's just personality creates who he is, and it makes people want to watch him. Was he the best in-ring guy? Was he the best this? No, but it's all of it together creates who he is and makes these storylines watchable because you don't know what's going to happen next. That's what wrestling is all about. Great
Best
choice.
in the world. Best in the world.
So mine, I'm going to go all the way back. This is what got me started into wrestling. Had no idea what wrestling was. Turned on Channel 9 one day. WWOR TV in New York. That's where I would watch my wrestling Saturday mornings. Turned it on. Saw these two guys going at it for the very first time. And I'm talking about Jimmy Superfly Snuka and Don Morocco. Now, I knew nothing about wrestling. This storyline, comes, I think as a kid, I didn't even realize what was going on. But it turns out Morocco is finishing up doing something in the ring, and Snuka is walking, or an interview segment, and Snuka is going to the ring to walk to his match. And Morocco sees it as a little bit of a disrespect, and he starts bad-mouthing Snuka, and it cumulates with Morocco basically spitting on Snuka. And this is where just happens to be where I turn on the TV, and Snuka loses his mind, rips Don Morocco's clothes off, starts beating him to a pulp, and delivers a promo like a wild man. And I was captivated from then on. I was hooked. I immediately got tickets to go see wrestling at Madison Square Garden later that month, and I went to see the Garden Wrestling at MSG from the end of '83 all the way to the end of '84. Every month, never missed. I was there for Hogan winning the title the first time. I saw Sheik win the title. Saw all this stuff, all because of the Morocco Snuka feud.
Wow, that's a gem.
Oh, killer, insane. And then obviously, you know the history. Snuka jumps off the cage and all that stuff. It's incredible.
You went deep. Deep.
Killer. So this was great. I mean, I know we've been trying to get this episode in for a long time. Obviously, wrestling is a big part of all of our lives. Los is gone now, but it was fun recapping some of the stuff. And I love to hear what impacts other guys too in wrestling. It's fun to hear other, because I think your a lot of your picks were more a little 90s based, which I liked. I love that Los, like you said, had to go deep with the Lucha Underground, and even the
Los
Powers of
deep.
Pain pick was pretty deep.
That was deep.
Yeah. All right, Rubes, before we go, any last words? Tell everyone where they can find you. Tell us what you're up to, where you are, where they can get everything they need to fix their Ruby fix for the new year.
Get your Ruby fix. Yeah, you can find me online on Planet Ruby on Facebook. From there, you can get my Instagram and as well as my Twitter, Planet Ruby on Facebook. And watch out for Kiss Nation coming 2023. We got shows lined up, kissnation.com. You can still check us out and check out a version of Kiss Nation that stresses Ruby a little bit less than when Joey and Carlos were in the band.
That is not true. Stop it. So just to plug Carlos, because he's not here, you can find Carlos, same thing, across all social media platforms. His name is Carlos Los Espada. Check him out on Instagram. Check him out on Facebook. He's doing a million things too, artwork. And he's got his own Kiss tribute down in Florida called Kiss It, I believe. Right, Rube? Do you know if that's it?
I just know he's annoying them now.
But he's killing it down in Florida. Check him out on social media. Check Ruby out. Kiss Nation is still firing on all cylinders. They're great. Go see them. Obviously, you can find me on all the social media platforms at Joey Cassata. This is Top 5 with Joey Cassata. Send us your emails at top5withjoeycassata@gmail.com. Let us know what your favorite wrestling storylines / feuds are of all time. Let us know what you think of our picks. Let us know if you think I should have these morons, these freaks back. Go check out Kiss Nation Mock Rock on my YouTube channel. It is hysterical watching us and our banter back and forth. Pre-Z-Rock days, if you will, the origin of Z-Rock started in Kiss Nation.
They stole our storylines.
All right, you animal. Go enjoy New Year's in New Orleans. Have some fun. We'll see you next time.
Happy holidays. Happy New Year's, everyone. Talk to you later. See you later, Joey. Thank you.
Later, guys.
Bye.